Look around behind me. Do you recognize this place? I gotta tell you, I pulled my car up and parked about 2 minutes before Calvin got here. And I just stood in the parking lot and took a deep breath. Now you'll say, why'd you do that? To pick up that wonderful Champlain fresh air? No, I could smell the pancakes in the parking lot. Pioneer days at Bourdeau Brothers and the Mason Road Champlain. It's a cool day, boy, in March in the North Country, expecting a little snow, but some of our viewers might remember 1 year ago in 2001 on the 5th day of March, I believe it was, when we got somewhere between 2 and 4 feet of snow, depending on how accurate your yardstick was. Oh, baby, we've been so lucky this year. Guess who we met in the parking lot today? Mr. Gerald Mayo. How are you, buddy?
Fine, Gordy.
You heard us. I'm doing great, as always, fat and happy. You heard us talking about one-room schoolhouses, and boy, did that open the door. I've had more responses, letters from people who used to teach at one-room schoolhouses, letters from people who went to one-room schoolhouses, and I got to tell you, I got a wonderful 30-page piece of memorabilia written by a former resident of Chateauguay who grew up there, who, unlike me, because I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, remembered every minute detail of his childhood, his one-room schoolhouse. He drew a map of where it was located. He drew a floor plan. He knew how many desks there were, where the teacher's desk was, where the boys and girls privies were attached in the back. And then he drew a picture of the outside of the building. It was amazing. Now, he didn't do that for me because he died in 1985. He did it for his grandchildren. Isn't that amazing? He wrote that thing down. I wrote a column about it that'll be coming up in the press in a little while. Where did you grow up, Gerald?
Well, I grew up in Champlain, and the house that I grew up in was right next to the 1187 restaurant. And where I live today, I built a new home there, was the one-room schoolhouse that I went to.
Come on.
Right.
Did you do this on purpose or what?
No, I came back out of service. I gave 4 years to the Air Force, and I came back to Champlain, and I took the postal tests, and I took the test for Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and lo and behold, they came a day apart saying, which job do you want? So my wife didn't want to move to Plattsburgh, so we stayed here. My father had purchased that piece of property a long time before, and starting out, you're not the richest person in the world, so we lived in it for a few years, and we saved enough money to build a new home. I was janitor at the school. I started at 5 years old, and I went there to the 5th grade, so I was 10 years old, and I became janitor when I was 8 years old.
That's incredible. Tell me now, where exactly was it located? Is it located, the building?
Well, if you know where...
1187.
Okay, and do you know where the Dudley Grove is?
No.
Okay.
I'm sure Calvin does.
Calvin knows.
He's smiling. He
knows where it is. It's on the Tallman Road.
Oh, okay.
So that's how we got started. We built a home, like I say, but I was janitor, and I was given a big key. It was about that long. The door was about that thick. And my job was to get there at 7 in the morning and to light the big stove that we had, a big potbelly stove. And on part of it, it had a tin around it so that the kids couldn't walk into it, the little ones. And I made the fire, and we had a...
You're talking wood fire here?
Wood fire.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I brought in the wood. It was in a shed in the back. In the back of that shed was the bathrooms.
Yeah, the privies.
Yeah.
I love it.
And that's, I make the fire and bring the water in. It was a 10-quart pail, and you'd take the top off and you'd pour it in, and it was insulated, and it was supposed to be cold water, all day. And there was a drip pail on the bottom, and empty that, and I had to do the erasers and clean the blackboard and sweep the schoolhouse. And I got $2 a month.
$2, big time.
Big
huh?
time. That was big time.
Isn't
And-
that now? Now you see, this guy who wrote this story in Chateauguay said that it rotated. Like I forgot, every school year or so much through the school year, one boy would take it one time, and the next boy would take it. Well, you did it.
Well, I was the closest to the school. You know. So that's.
So
you
you,
know.
so you had to get up pretty early. Now, were you doing chores at home at that time?
Oh yes.
You were on the family farm.
Right. Well, no, my father was a farm laborer,
I see.
and he worked for farmers. He worked for Mr. Hitchcock at that time, and yeah, I had 2 other jobs. Every night, I would take a little 2-quart pail of milk and go up to the Dudley Groves. Miss Dudley was my teacher,
Oh boy.
and I would get 25 cents a week for that, and I got 25 cents a week to bring in the wood. I had 2 wood boxes to fill, one upstairs and one downstairs, and that was my chores and my money. That's was big time then.
I hope the young kids are watching this program and the parents say, sit down, listen to this. I asked you to take out 1 bag of garbage this morning. You told me that was too much work. Listen to Gerald talking about what he had to do.
Right.
Plus, you were in school. It was a pretty long school gate day. Was it 9 to 4? What was it?
It was 9 to 4, and yes, it was a long day. But the thing of it is she had, at that time, we had 4 classes the last year I went to. And we had the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th. I guess depending on her mood, it's which class got the most attention that particular day, because she was getting elderly. And the reason why they kept that school open was so that she could meet her retirement requirements.
Oh, is it that? Can you imagine doing that today?
No way you would do that today. But, you know,
There weren't too many kids, right?
we were 6, I think.
In your grade or in the school?
No, in the school.
Oh, in the whole school.
Yeah, there was Bernard Johnson. I tried to remember who they were. There was Bernard Johnson, Doris Bulris, and I think Rita Richards, and then there was a LePan boy, and you know I can't remember the others.
I don't know how you did that much.
We had 14 seats, and we had a big sandbox, a huge sandbox. And if you were good, you could get to play in the sandbox. If you weren't, that was your punishment. You couldn't play in the sandbox.
Sandbox, where was that located?
That was in the corner of the room,
Inside.
inside a big
Wow.
sand table. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
If you were on the punishment list, you didn't get to play in the sandbox. So I didn't play in it very much.
Yeah, I know all about those because my first year in school, it was kind of dark in the corner I sat in most of the time, and it was on a high stool with one of those pointed hats up there. I've told that story many times, but it's absolutely true. And my mother saved all my old report cards, so I know what kind of a person I was. All the little comments on the side.
The biggest shock that I got was after I turned the key for the last time, I was going to the big school.
Oh boy.
And I went to St. Mary's Academy.
You did?
Yes, I graduated from St. Mary's Academy. So the first day of school, I went in and they said, what grade? And I said, 6th grade. And boy, when they took those books out and opened them up, I said, whoa, there's something wrong here. And they tested me, and like I told Calvin, I'm not ashamed of it. I tested for 3rd grade, but I had 3 wonderful nuns said, you're too big to go into 3rd grade. You're going to stay in the 6th grade, but you're going to do double duty. You're going to have to come and read for us and do arithmetic for us and try to bring yourself up. Within 6 months, I was pretty much in control of that, and I went in sixth
Thank
grade. And
goodness they took you under their wing.
Yes.
Huh?
Well, that's why I feel so sad about St. Mary's not having the nuns anymore, because they were dedicated. That's all they had to do. You know, when their day's work was done, they were just going back to the convent. So, you know, they had more time. So.
But it was a different age, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Now
It
we
sure
have
was.
tremendous
It
controversy
sure was.
over testing for little
Right.
kids in fourth grade,
When
and
I-
it gets people up in arms.
Yes, when I tore the building down, we found a homemade baseball bat.
Come on.
Yeah,
Did you save it?
Yes, I have it in the
Oh,
garage,
man.
and it's got tape on it, and it's made out of a piece of cedar, and you can see where it was whittled to have a knob on the end and all that.
Isn't that neat? What a piece of memorabilia.
Yeah, that's, you
Goodness
know.
knows it could be 75 years old for all you
Oh,
know.
all of that, all of
Yeah, or
that.
more.
Well, I'm close to 50, so
I bet you are. I'm not too close to 50 in either direction, believe me. Calvin's the only one close to 50
Yeah, I know.
around here. So you went 5 years
yes,
to that school.
yes,
And it's pretty poignant memories.
yes.
I bet you could draw the inside of that
Oh,
schoolhouse
sure.
today with no problem at all.
No problem. It was just one room.
I know I could, because I spent a lot of time doing this, looking around.
You see, they were Dudley Groves. They had 4 or 5 of them, and only one was married, and he came back to live with his sisters, and none of the ladies were married. So Mary taught at Champlain Central, I think, at that time, or the elementary school. I think it was 4th or 5th grade she taught, and then Maud taught me. And Maud was way up in age. I have some clippings on it telling about her teaching career.
Do you have any photographs of the building?
You know,
Either
Gordy,
when you were a youngster or later on?
Gordy, you know, that is something I went through all my mother's stuff. My mother kept scrapbooks. I have a trunk that I haven't even touched yet, and I have scrapbooks.
You got trunks too?
Yeah,
I got those
Loaded-
trunks. I haven't
loaded
even
with-
looked at them in years. and
loaded
years.
with paper, and one of these days I'll open it and
That's
see
what I
what's in
keep
there.
saying. One of these days, mañana.
We're just too busy. We're just too busy.
All those are the golden memories of your
Yes.
childhood. I can't remember a lot of specific names from my childhood, but I do remember my teacher was Agnes Labarge over in Messina Center, and I've told this story on tape many times before. I was working at the radio station for quite a few years, and as you know, in the local news here in the small stations in the North Country, you read the obituaries.
Right.
And all of a sudden somebody handed me one, and I read a death in the news. Miss Agnes Labarge died at the age of like 97. She had moved in her later years to the Ellenburg area, and I didn't know that. Had I known that, I would have stayed in touch with her and told her that I was sorry for all the grief I caused her, and that she had almost as great an influence on me as my own mother did.
I
Because
walked.
They had us quite a few hours.
Did you
every
walk
day.
to school?
Oh, of course, but I was only about a half a mile away at
Well-
the most, quarter mile maybe.
We used to cut through the woods, and there was a brook, and they built us a walkway over it. And to get home quick, we used to go through the field and over the brook and up, and that's how I got there. And then they came in with a bus. It was a so-called bus, Mr. Fred Hicks. I don't know if you remember him. He was allowed a big sedan, I guess you want to call it. He used to draw the milk and the kids at the same time.
Oh, that's pretty good. Isn't
You know.
that amazing?
Yeah, and
Well, you were lucky that later to have a school bus, because we never had a school bus. I didn't know there were things such as school buses until I was much older.
yeah. And then the next school bus was Amos LaValle. I think you remember Amos, and then Joe Filion, and we went up there. Yeah, I graduated from St. Mary's 1949.
What?
I was very young.
Was there a name of that school? Did it have a name
Yes,
or a
it was
number?
the Dudley Schoolhouse, and it was school district number 6. right to the right of it, facing it, there was another schoolhouse that's gone. And then if you go on the Dudley curve and you go down a ways, you'll see some bushes. There was another schoolhouse there. So there was 3 one-room schoolhouses within half a mile of each other.
Now, this is a concept that young people today, children, even their parents, don't quite understand. This is long before the days of centralization.
Oh, yeah.
And almost every neighborhood had a one-room schoolhouse. So because the kids did have to walk to school, and you had to be somewhere within proximity of a mile or 2 or 3 to get to that schoolhouse.
Right.
And when schools got centralized, the one-room schoolhouse was passed. Now we still have a lot of the one-room schoolhouses standing in Clinton County. Some of them look similar to the days when they were used as schools because people have kept that kind of feeling, and others are so changed into houses and homes now you'd never recognize them. Some were moved miles and miles away.
I like a little bit of history. I was the rural carrier here for the post office for 31 years.
Oh, you were? Ah.
So I saw the stone schoolhouse which sits on 9B and the Leggett Road on the corner. And I saw it demolished, and I felt bad when it was, the roof went in, and then so they just took it away. And Herbert Burnell lives in a one-room schoolhouse next to the Jerry Ware farm. I don't know what district that was, but that was a one-room schoolhouse also. There's quite a few of them. There was quite a few.
And the school teachers that taught in those, some taught in the same school for 25, 30, 35, 40 years,
yeah.
Some for a short time, and then moved on. They were almost always women.
Right.
There weren't too many male school teachers in the one-room schoolhouse.
My hands aren't too bad, but the punishment there was...
Here we go.
The ruler came out, and you had to put your hand there, and depending on what you've done, it was 1 or 2 or 3 whacks on the hand.
Yeah.
And you had to hold your hand there. That was...
There was a thing called corporal punishment, and if the teacher didn't give it to you good enough, you got another shot when you got home.
You didn't tell Pa about it.
I got to interject a little bit. When I went to St. Mary's, we had one nun that would do that. The others didn't have that kind of. But I remember hearing a story about she'd hold your hand and she'd whack it with the ruler, and this one guy pulled his hand away. She whacked herself.
Well,
That was the end of that.
I don't think I should comment. She might still be alive, and she might come after us. We do all have those golden memories of the one-room schoolhouses. I want to say, just to make the picture a little more complete, Jer, these schoolhouses didn't have any running water, right?
Nope.
They had no electricity.
Yes, we had electricity.
You had electricity.
We were very fortunate. We had a lady by the name of Mrs. Ferriel was the superintendent or something like that, and she saw to it that 2 wires were run to the school, and we had 4 lights. That's all we had.
Big time, 4 lights.
Big time, 4 lights.
Probably bare light bulbs. Can you remember?
No, I think they had a dome of some kind, if I can remember. Maybe that came after a year or 2 after I started school. But that was our electricity.
We had electricity.
And our...
there wasn't much heat from those light bulbs in the morning.
No, and our bathroom was, or privy as you call it, was in back of the shed where we kept the wood. And there was a petition in between, and that's where you went. And you couldn't be gone too long, because if you were, somebody was looking for you, and that was the teacher, because some of the boys would forget to come back to class.
I know how that goes too. I knew the way home, believe me. What I would like now, did you bring your lunch?
Yes.
Did you go home
absolutely. No. What?
Because sometimes the old teachers would bring a pot of stew. You'd make the fire in the morning. The teacher would bring a pot of soup or a pot of stew and put it on the stove, and that's what you'd share for lunch.
No.
And sometimes kids would bring lunch, and if they lived close enough, they'd walk home.
No, I didn't walk home because we brought
You brought
our
a
own
lunch, brought a
lunch.
sandwich.
Yes, homemade bread. And you know,
You didn't have Ziploc bags either, did
No,
you?
Gordy,
Wax paper.
I feel terrible to say this, but it's the truth. My mother was, like everybody's mother, was the best cook in the world.
Oh yeah.
And she made outstanding bread. And of course, when you bring homemade bread for a sandwich, it's kind of thick, and you know.
Oh yeah.
And
You're making me drool, Jer.
we didn't want to tell anybody that we didn't have the sliced bread. A couple of them were where they had sliced bread. And I tell this to a lot of people. Today I would give $25 for a loaf of bread and stand on that table and yell, you know.
Boy, oh
But
boy.
it's one of those things that you remember of your childhood.
You know, I make bread every week, but I don't do it that way. I've got one of those, one of the original bread makers that still works. But I love the smell of baking bread, baking biscuits, and that old home cooking in those old kitchens, especially with wood fires in the kitchen, were certainly amazing.
Right.
Now, wouldn't you be thrilled if somebody watching this program on one of the hometown cable stations around the North Country had pictures of that schoolhouse when
I'd
you
love
were a
it.
kid?
I'd love it. I'd love it.
they're-
I'd pay for them. I'd get them reproduced. I'd do anything. Yeah, I don't have a picture of it.
Because there were cameras around, even though
yeah.
that's a long time
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
There were cameras around, and
Yeah.
once in a while somebody'd bring a brownie to school, the old box brownie, Kodak brownies, and take a picture of the kids. I got one in third grade that is so funny. Looks like it came out of 1582, you know, with strange-looking kids. And my mother, of course, we were dirt poor like you were. And my mother made us wear knickers. And I've told that before too. I hated knickers. First of all, I couldn't stand wool against my skin. Secondly, everybody had a jackknife. Now kids can't carry a jackknife to school. I had high top boots with a little pocket with a jackknife. And the first thing I'd do before I'd get out of my own yard was reach down with a jackknife and cut that rubber around the bottom. And so they were kind of dangling on me by the time I got home. So I took a lot of heat for that. But yes, I do remember those days.
Yeah, those were great days.
If somebody's got a photograph of that school,
I'd love it.
call Gerald Mayo, contact Calvin or me, and we'll get that picture. First of all, we'd love to show it.
Yes.
Because back in the 70s, I did some research on one-room schoolhouses in Clinton County, a story that I won't go into fully here, but a couple of college professors started to do research on the one-room schoolhouses through a series of tragic accidents and deaths. Somebody took the script they had written about each one-room schoolhouse and went in one direction. Somebody who had the slides went in the other direction. So all we ended up with, a friend of mine and myself, were the slides.
Yeah, that's
So we spent 2 or 3 years talking to senior citizens in every township and trying to say, do you remember this building? Do you remember that building? We identified probably half to 3/4 of them before we were through, and by now, that's 25 or so years later, most of those buildings are now gone. Too bad, huh?
I found the picture of the honor roll that was constructed by the machinists from the shop of the boys that went in service in 1941 on. And I asked, and finally I said, gee, my mother must have cut that out somewhere. So I sat down one afternoon and started hunting, and lo and behold, I found the picture of
You
it.
found it?
Yep. I
Is
have
it?
it, and I showed it, and people don't believe it, but I said, there it is.
Did you have in your little schoolhouse, did you have blackboards all the way around or just on the front?
Just in the front.
Just one big one on the front.
And on the top were the numbers and the ABC.
In the ABCs, I remember that's how I learned mine.
Yeah.
And did they have the maps that pulled down?
Yes. On one corner, it had the maps for when we did our history. Yes.
Different maps that pulled
Yes.
down, like almost like a shade, as I
Right.
remember in ours.
Right. Well, there's a couple of them didn't work, so we'd pin it up on the. After the wear, it's.
Some kids would go outside for recess, and we'd be pitching pennies up in the front of the school.
You have to realize my father went there also.
Come on,
Yes.
you gotta be kidding.
No, my father also went there. and my two brothers. But they, you know, they were older than I was, so they left and went to the high school before I was the last one, so.
Well, we've talked quite a bit on this program, and certainly in my column I've written a lot about one-room schoolhouses. I never actually went to a one-room schoolhouse, but I went to a two-room schoolhouse. Half the elementary grades were on the first floor and the other half on the second floor, but they were constructed roughly the same, and you had two teachers, and they had to be pretty stalwart back in those days because we were young country, rural farm stock, and even in high school, you know, we were terrible.
I got to tell you a funny story. I was sitting next to this student. I think he was in the second grade and I was in the fourth. And he had to take a test. And I'll tell you who it is. It was Lester LePan. I don't know if you remember Lester. And I helped him with his. And the teacher knew that he didn't do it. So he told her that I did it. You know, I got 3 whacks on the hand for that. I didn't appreciate that. But I learned that you don't do that. You know.
Well, you're just bringing back a flood of memories that I was trying to repress back into my head for many, many years about the times that by writing things on the back of your hand and stuff in fourth grade. But I also remember good things that happened in school, and I do have wonderful memories because my parents and this teacher I mentioned, Agnes Labarge, instilled in me a love for reading, which I've never forgotten today, because she'd let us read so many books, and you'd have to write a little book report, and put it. Every student had a little pocket along one wall. And then at the end of a certain amount of time, they count how many little book reports you put in there. So,
I remember the Christmas play.
Oh, golly.
I had to take 2 parts. I was Santa Claus and I was an elf. So I had to do double duty.
You only had 6 kids in school. I mean,
right,
you know.
and we had a quick switch of uniforms there from Santa Claus but my mother was there, and you know, we got by, and the parents would come, and we thought it was a big deal.
Isn't that great? I can remember every Valentine's Day, and you'd count how many Valentines and make sure the guy next to you didn't get more Valentines
than you
did.
And you made them.
And they were homemade. Oh, sure.
Yeah,
you made them at home.
Of course.
Well, you know, it's very easy to find out what kind of a kid I was in the little schoolhouse in Messina Center. And even though I've tried to hide some of those memories over the years, many years later when I moved to Morrisonville, I found that a lady lives about a mile from me was in that grade. Her name is Jean Williams. She now goes to my church, and she's not afraid to tell anybody that I used to dip her pigtail. She sat in front of me. In the inkwell. But she always got back at me, and I've told this story before, but it's a good one. We played a lot of marbles back in those days.
Yes.
Kids don't, you know, with all their Game Boys and stuff, they don't even do it. But the springtime, you know, we played pots of 500, and I had kept all the marbles in mason jars.
Oh, my.
And I'd go out, and one day, she cleaned me out. She was very, very good, and she won all my marbles. And I brought home the empty mason jars. I walked in, and my mother said to me, "You let a girl beat you at marbles?" And she kids me about it. This woman kids me about it even today. So, yeah, great memories.
Yes, you're talking about discipline. I served on the school board for 7 years, and discipline came up quite a bit, and what the teachers could do and couldn't do. But I remember, I think I was in the second grade. I had done something, I can't recall what it was, but I got my rulers. And my father was working across the road from the schoolhouse. So, I said, I'll get even with this Miss Dudley. I'll go tell my father what she did to me. Mistake number 1.
Big mistake.
You know, you don't get that support from the parents today. He got up to me and he said, "You did that?" And course. I said, yes. And he said, she whipped you? He grabbed me by the arm and he warmed my little bottom a little bit and he sent me home. And he says, you won't do that again. And this is the difference with the parenting now. Now you do something to a child and the parent is going to react, and it's too bad. I look for more discipline in the school, but I guess it'll never happen.
It's difficult, and it certainly is a topic that's wide open for discussion. I hope somebody finds some pictures of the old schoolhouses,
Yes.
yours and maybe some of the others that we've never seen.
Right.
We would love to do another program on one-room schoolhouses, because interestingly enough, there are people in their 90s and almost 100 years old who taught in one-room schoolhouses who are still alive, but we're losing them real fast. And we're also, the people who went to one-room schoolhouses are dwindling in number, like a lot of our World War II veterans. So it's great, although you and I plan to live another 40 or 45 years. Still, it's good that we did this interview today.
They better have some good canes if I'm going to live that long.
Hold us up real strong, huh?
Yes, I caught your program where you mentioned you wanted to talk to some. As far as I know, I'm the only one in Champlain that around here. Doris, she's a Bourdeau now. I think she lives in Peru or Plattsburgh. And Bernard Johnson, I saw him at the class reunion. He lives in Virginia somewheres, and I think a couple of the others have passed away. So there's not too many of us in Champlain that had that opportunity.
Fortunately, because of the wonderful age of the internet and computers, every time I mention something about the one-room schoolhouses on the column that I write, I do get responses from all over the country, and in Hawaii and Alaska, and people say, yeah, I went there, or I did this, or I did that. And it keeps it alive. Those are good memories.
One of our substitute teachers, I think he probably knew the lady as Rita Stone. She was Rita Blaine. She lived right next to the schoolhouse, and she was a substitute teacher. And she was just starting out in her career, and she just passed away a couple years ago, didn't she? Or is she still here, Rita? Rita's still here. Her husband passed away.
She may not be glad to hear that.
No, I'm sorry, Rita.
I hope she gets to see it on TV.
No, I'm sorry, Rita. I got you mixed up.
News of my death was greatly exaggerated, as Samuel Clemens said.
She was a substitute teacher, and I remember her. And yeah, that's discipline was theirs, and the parents. I never knew of any parent that.
That was true, and even in my high school days. I mean, the principal in our high school, he ruled with when I say he ruled with an iron fist, I'm not kidding you, because he was a wonderful man, a fair man. He inspired me in so many ways, but don't step out of line. You're liable to go against a wall or he'd drag you over the desk and throw you down the stairs. These were big country boys, and especially by the time we got in high school, and they just didn't have time for nonsense.
We had one gentleman that, when I was on the board, he was that way, and I think he got a lot of respect from all the students. That's Mr. Bud Moore.
Oh my goodness, Bud Moore.
Yeah, he was an outstanding disciplinarian. He didn't take no nonsense, and people don't realize how good he was to the children. I know my three daughters went to school there when he was there, and we don't know how many times that he bought children's lunch that they didn't have the money.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and yes, and a lot of people don't realize it. They always thought he was a tough man, but he had a heart of gold.
Soft heart down inside.
Yeah.
Isn't that true of so many people you know?
He was great. I haven't seen him for some time. He lives in Plattsburgh, I guess, on Bailey Avenue. And one of these days, I'm going to stop in and say hi to him.
Just knock on the door and say hello? Yeah. Sure, I bet he'd be glad to hear that. Yeah. What a story. Yeah, who guessed that that's the way we start our Pioneers Day television show this year with you, Jerry? That's wonderful. And then maybe we'll do a whole other one on your, how many years with the Postal Service?
31.
Oh, God. That's great.
Yeah, I had a lot of nice people. I remember this gentleman when he was a little younger.
Oh, really?
I've been retired 15 years, and I worked 31 years. So, how many years is that? It's 46, and ask him how old he is.
Oh, yeah, we know how old he is. He's tracking.
You wish.
He's tracking about 10 years younger than I
Yeah.
am. So, anyway, Jerry, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
I'm glad we got the story. We're the kind of people, if we got somebody and we're going to talk to them right now, we're not going to wait till tomorrow.
Yes.
So maybe you can open up the door, and if we get some photographs of your old schoolhouse, or
Yes.
some people who went to one-room schoolhouses, we'll do chapters 2, 3, and 4. And
Great. Great.
You'll be our number one advisor. Jerry, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Calvin.
We got more people trying to sneak out the side doors and avoid our microphones and cameras than anything else. Jermaine, how are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm doing really good. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's it going so far?
Today has been a great day with lots of people, big turnout, and hopefully we'll still break our record of last year of 250 pounds of link sausage. That's what that's what we did last year, and hopefully we'll do more.
Seems to me, I put away about 175 all by myself last year. Just to let the people who may be seeing this program for the first time know why you do it. It's kind of a tribute to farmers every year, isn't it?
Well, it's been a tradition. We've been doing this now for around 20 years. We just do these farmer appreciation days where we let the farmers come in with the family, try to put on a good feed, a place to sit where it's warm, and just discuss about their crop needs, whether it's fertilizer, seeds, weed control programs. We try to bring in chemical people such as the DuPont people, Syngenta people, so we got good people here with good information, and hopefully we can help the farmers resolve any problems and and be a little bit more successful at what we do.
It's an interesting thing. Every year we bring it up, and every year we bring it up again. Farming's not easy these days. I mean, it's never been easy, but it's getting tougher and tougher for people. Calvin gave me something when I first walked in that he saw on the news right before he came here today. And this is a very stark and startling figure. We lost 500 family farms in New York State in the past year. How many acres? 1 million? 1 million acres of farmland. Isn't that amazing?
Well, it's a concern for people like ourselves. There's no question, as farm numbers keep falling every year, acres, fall also at the same time. How do we keep these businesses alive if we have less people to deal with? One thing for sure is that I think the ones who are staying are getting larger. They're better business people, and maybe we can all make it work. But, there's no question that it's tough out there. Price of milk is still in the $13 a hundred. That goes back to 1980 prices, and it's 20 years later. Corn is still $2 a bushel. And when I started in business in 1974, corn was $2.50 a bushel. So we are looking.
Really?
Yes, sir. We are looking of.
Same on our side of the border.
Right, working 30 years later now. Corn is cheaper than what it was, and and that's a tough game to play. Not too many working people could actually say they would work for less money per hour today than they did 25 years ago and be able to pay their bills. So farmers have gotten to be very efficient people. They're hard-working people. They're very dedicated. And they farm. Farming today is a high-risk business, so people have to, be loaded up with information and be able to do as good a job as possibly can be done.
We've said it before, and we'll say it again because Calvin and I grew up on farms, working on farms. Just talked to Jerry Mayo, talked about all the chores they had to do as little kids working on the farm. Farming is a very personally satisfying life. It's good to be close to the earth, as they say, and to raise animals and to have to work so hard, because if you do make it by the end of the day, you're very satisfied. But how? The question is, how do you impart that to your kids and to their kids? And that's part of the problem now. The kids are watching how hard dad has to work for a living, and they're saying to themselves, you want me to take over this farm? That's very difficult.
It's finances.
Let me find out who you are.
I'm Dennis Wallace
Dennis, where are you from?
from St. Bernard, over near Hemmingford, on the other side of the border.
And you were nodding your head there as we were
Well, it's
talking
the same
there.
thing.
It's
Same
not
thing.
easy for you either.
Same thing on our side of the border. you have to keep getting more efficient, and there's to keep alive and
Cover more ground.
yeah, cover more ground, work longer hours. You got to be an accountant, you got to be a mechanic, you got to be a farmer, and to pass it on to your children. Sometimes you wonder if you want to give it to them for all the trouble it's going to be, because when you're working that hard and you're working less for minimum wage, a lot of times the only value you have is your land after, you know. And if you sold it the full value to your children, they could never make a go of it. Never. It wouldn't last. And I don't think it's any different over here.
No,
is it?
and you know, probably the sad part about the whole thing, Gordy, is the fact that I'm not sure the American people really appreciate how cheap the food prices really are in this
They
country.
don't think about it.
You
They
know?
see a processed product go off the shelves. And they don't have any clue where it started.
I have a statistic for you. On Canada, they call Food Free Day in Canada. That's when the average worker has made enough money to pay for his food all year. You know what the date is?
No,
February 7th.
come on.
February 7th. That's when the average worker has made enough money to pay for his food for the entire year. That's scary.
Right. That's
Yeah.
very few days.
37, 38 days to pay for your entire year's supply of food. And that some people should be saying we should be proud of that, but that's very scary for people like us, because it means we're just not getting paid for the when it only takes so few days to pay for your food. What is more important in life than eating and reproducing or whatever? You know, that's what we're here for. You know?
But the question is how do we get the word to the general population? Yeah, people appreciate farmers and farming in a rural area like Moore, Champlain, Rouse's Point, you know, but in the big cities, they don't have a clue. They bring the fresh air kids up here and they've never seen a cow.
I think
Saw one.
you could close every farm in this area, and the people in the grocery store wouldn't know a bit of difference, would they?
No,
That's the sad part of
That's
it.
the sad.
Wouldn't even notice the difference. You know? It would just be more fresh fields of hay to go and play in or something, but they wouldn't realize that the food comes from the farm, not from the store. You know?
What is the difference across the border in Canada in terms of the help the federal government gives to the farmer?
Well, it's all debatable. Some people say the Americans get more support than we do. They say we get more support than them. It's all done in different programs, you know. Some are land buybacks. You got all sorts of things, so they're hidden. So I really can't say. But I know as far as the dairy farmers in Canada, they're very well off. They have a good, decent living. They work very hard, but they have a quota price. And it's a big difference. A lot of people think it scares them because it's controls, but you wouldn't find very many dairy farmers in Canada that don't like it. The one problem is for the young people to start. It's almost prohibitive for them to start because a quota is so expensive. You know, if you had a quota that was free, that was just allotted to farms, and the trouble is your price goes up, and what do they do right away? They put in more cows and the price goes back down. Where in Canada the price is stable. So it makes a difference. The chicken farmers are the same in Canada. Chickens and milk farmers are the two that are under quota systems.
See, I didn't know that. I'm so glad I came up here today.
Well, you know, the other thing is, like here in the States, our pricing is done, of course, by supply and demand. You know, and we never know exactly what we're going to get paid. And that makes it very difficult to budget, you know, if you don't know what you're going to make. So if you want to expand or you want to do some sort of a budget on how you're going to pay your bills, you almost need to know what you're going to earn. And if you don't know what you're going to earn or get for your product, it makes it difficult, okay? So, you know, basically, hopefully that, you know, the farmers can survive. There's no question the large farmer with massive volume, you know, if they're managed well, are doing relatively well. But those people who are managing those large dairy farms are also high quality, good business people that are under a lot of stress because, you know, it is a lot of fine tuning to make these things profitable. There's no question about it. You know,
A lot of these farmers are now college graduates, and if they're not, they got to do an awful lot of home study, you know.
The problem we see too in Canada is we're on a treadmill, you know, and we don't seem to. We keep working harder, we keep getting more efficient, but the bottom line does not increase. We just have to keep being more efficient to stay at the same place we were 5 years ago. You know, I sold corn in 1976 for $190 Canadian a ton. I'd have a hard time now to get in what, 135, 140 Canadian.
You got to be kidding.
Oh yeah, in 1976 I took a 3-week vacation with 2 tons of corn.
That is pretty laughable today, isn't
Now
it?
I wouldn't even think of it. That's a good way of figuring it out. 76, what's that, $380. I took a 2-week vacation across Canada. I wouldn't even assume of doing that today.
Isn't that
The other
amazing?
thing I have here that I'd like to show is the average milk prices, per year in the Federal Order 2 market of what milk is brought. And, here in 1940, we were getting $1.90 for our milk. In 1950, we were getting $3.99. 1960, $4.32. 1970, $5.89. 1980, $12.64. 1990, $13.43. 1997, $12.76. Okay, and last year 2001 was a little bit better, but we're still in that $13 window even now, today in 2002. So we're going back to the prices we got in 1980 or 1981.
Cost of production always goes up, and your cost of product doesn't. That's about the size of it.
We know what inflation is in this country, and almost nobody else would put up with that, would they?
Well, there's no question that it's not easy for the farmer, and that's why we've lost so many farms. And I don't know at what point will somebody be concerned about that. I mean, at one point, who's going to feed these people? Who's going to feed this country? And where's the food going to come from? And up to now, the housewife or the American people haven't been concerned because there's always been plenty of food there. But there's probably going to be a day when that won't happen, just like it has in other countries.
Well, we have people lobbying, but apparently the voices are not loud enough. I don't know.
I don't know. In Canada, I don't think we're 1% of the population anymore. We have no power. The farmers have no power anymore because as we get bigger, we take out 10 other farmers. Like in my case, we've probably over the years, my brother and I replaced 10 farmers in our little corner of the world.
Really?
And that's not exceptional. That's probably normal, right? And so we, instead of having 10 voices speaking or 10 farmers buying at the grocery store, you have one. And in politics, the same thing. We have no power anymore.
It's kind of sad. We didn't mean to make this program
A negative.
a negative program. But I also believe it's very important to let our general audience know how tough it is for farmers. And we call them the salt of the earth, and we really mean it. I mean, we in all of our interviews, we found out how many lessons we learned on the farm. How many lessons as little kids about perseverance, about sticking with something, about the value about hard work.
Work ethics.
The work ethics and honesty and humility and, all those things. Mother Nature has a habit of putting those right into you just because you work on a farm. And so it's hard to replace those things. So there are a lot of good things about farming, but we're pointing out the bad things so that we can let the audience know. And if anybody does want to express their opinion to their local senators and congressmen and take a trip to Washington and speak on behalf of farmers, we'd love to have you. We do have some strong voices in our government who are advocating for farmers, lobbying for agriculture on both sides of the border, but some days you must feel as though it's a losing battle.
It's frustrating sometimes. Like I say, a lot of people, we serve milk from my brother's farm on our table, and people from the city come out and spend a weekend or something, and, well, that's cow's milk. We want store milk. And it's kind of funny.
Yeah, did we just turn the faucet in the back room?
And that's it. I think people...
That's cow's milk. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. This one girl was there at our place 2 weekends ago, and she says, "Oh, that's 100% milk. I only want 2% milk." So my neighbor said, "Why didn't you just give her a little bit in the bottom and fill the rest with water?" But when I was in grade 1, I still remember my teacher asking what their grandfathers did for a living. I think 99% of the kids raised their hands. They were farmers. Now in my children's grades, if you ask the same question, I doubt it'd be 10%. That's how far away we've got from the farm.
Maybe even less.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the history of our country and history in general. And I was down at the Plattsburgh State Special Collections in the Feinberg Library. They have a wonderful group of over 1,000 old school books. Mm-hmm. And you look at school books from the early 1900s and from back in the 1800s, and the math problems and the English sentences and everything you learn was around how many bushels it took for this and how many acres it took for this and how many rods a field was around.
That's gone now.
You don't find those math problems anymore.
No, that's long gone now.
Yeah.
The farm, like the common sense of it taking to run a farm is left the community because there's nobody left from the farms that are the mechanics, the accountants, and the business managers and everything else.
You mentioned all the things a farmer has to be, because if he had to hire all those extra things done, when something breaks, he's got to know how to fix it. So he's got to be a mechanic, sometimes an engineer. He has to sometimes even design equipment and parts for what he has, because you can't buy new equipment every year.
Well, that's part of being more efficient too. We have to, you have to do everything yourself that you can do, because once you start hiring, when you're making minimum wage working on the farm and you're paying mechanics $30 and $40 an hour, you have to think twice before you can transcribe that. It's basically what Germain said. Our prices haven't changed in 20-some years. In fact, they've gone down, and inflation has always gone up with us. So we're fighting, and it's no different either side of the border. No different.
I always like to get the history of people. Where were you born and brought up?
I was born and brought up on Roxham Road, which is straight south of Perry's Mills, New York.
You were?
Yep.
No
I
kidding.
have parents on both sides of relatives on both sides of the border, and on our farm, the Wallaces have been farming on Roxham Road for 220 some years.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's just something to be proud of, but I hope I can carry it on to my children too.
So you moved across the border back?
We originally came from Scotland, both our families.
Oh, see,
Both sides of the
I'm going there in June, and I cannot wait to find out what outlaws the Littles were in the Highlands of Scotland.
We came from Scotland. Germain came from Quebec too.
Yes,
right?
we did. We came from Canada. My parents came from Canada in 1945.
Oh, wow. And Calvin's family from north of the border, and I'm sure my relatives, the Littles, settled somewhere up in Ontario and snuck across the border down around Rochester.
Yeah. No, it's like I say, when you can be on the same farm for over 200 years, it's something to be proud of. It's something we'd like to continue, but it's not easy. There's no, but it's a great life. We enjoy it.
Well,
Not much more I can say.
after all of that, he can still smile, so you can't be all bad.
Well, my bank manager's not here, so it's okay.
You have a big family?
I have 2 children and a wife who works on the farm. Yeah, the whole
It has
family.
to be a
works on it.
family affair, doesn't
Yeah, we run about 800 acres of land, and we pretty well do it all ourselves. Yeah.
it? Talked about 3 weeks vacation on some corn way back when. Farmers don't get those 2 weeks in Tahiti and
But we don't
10
take the corn
days
with
in
us.
Bahamas. Oh, you
We
don't
can't
take
trade the corn off.
Yeah, it's a 7-day-a-week deal when you work on a farm too. People don't think about that.
can
People want to work now. I work for Clinton County, and my job requires that I work 35 hours a week. In farmers' terms, that's about a day and a half.
Well, we do that in the wintertime. I'm not an animal farmer. I'm just a cash cropper.
Are you?
But we work. The winter is easy. It's only about 40 hours a week.
You never had dairy cattle?
Yeah, no, I used to raise pigs a long time ago, and then we just went into cash cropping. Yeah, the margin of profit was so low that we decided just to grow the feed instead. So we specialize in feed. We grow wheat, corn, and soybeans, and you try to do that even better every year. That's why I'm here negotiating good prices with Germain.
It's nice to come down and see other people who are doing the same things and commiserate with other farmers, and that's why we come back here year after year to meet some of our friends and see how they're doing. And it is sad when we learn that more farms are closing down, but it is good to meet somebody like you who's made it a success by sheer dint of hard work.
Well, a lot of Dennis' success comes from a positive attitude, and just not looking at all the negatives, looking at the positives, and that makes a big difference. Even though the prices are poor, you can't always go to the negative side of things. You have to be positive, in how you think and how you're going to perform and how you're going to do your work, And that's important. That's why Dennis has been so successful. It's a very positive.
If you sit down all the time and say, this isn't going to work, and you worry about it, while you're worrying about it, that day's work's not getting done.
I often say it's a war every day, but I don't mean it as a bad thing. I mean it's a war to be sharp, to know where you're going, to have your plans ahead. Buying a piece of machinery for me sometimes is a 2-year project. You get your idea and you watch it and you think about it. And quick decisions are sometimes bad decisions on the farm. You have to think ahead a lot, and a lot of paperwork. a lot of planning.
Well, when we mentioned the farmer, all the things he had to be, we didn't say he had to be a weatherman, but you got to be a weatherman too, don't you? Huh?
Yeah.
Especially in your business.
Yeah, especially where we live. We listen to your side of the weather, and we listen to Montreal, and we flip a coin, and we see where we're gonna go.
See if it changes in French and English, right?
Yeah, well, we can do that too. Yeah.
You know what? This has been a great conversation. Dennis, thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Maybe we'll see you again next year.
I'm usually here. Yeah.
Just never know, huh?
Right. Dennis is always welcome here.
That's great.
He's been a great customer, great asset to us too.
Now I gotta go home and load soybeans for them tomorrow.
Oh, here we go. Thanks a lot, Dennis.
Okay, you're welcome.
Well, I got a cup of coffee and moved across the room, so I'm going to be all right. I'm with Joe Mayer. How are you, Joe?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. You're an agronomist with Pioneer, right?
Yes, I am, yes.
From where, Joe?
Actually, I work out of an office down in Pennsylvania, southeast Pennsylvania. And
You haven't had much different a winter in southeast Pennsylvania than we have up here. This weather, this winter has been incredible for everybody.
yeah, we've on one side we've enjoyed it a lot, but on the other side there are some concerns about the dry weather and how that may impact our cropping plans here in the future, and how it'll affect the early crop growth. And
I know you've had some droughts down there, and we certainly have here in the North Country, some areas more severe than others. And while we're here talking about farms and farming, that is a big concern for some farmers, wherever it happens, isn't it?
yeah, we were almost 15 inches behind normal rainfall last year, and so far through the first couple months of this year we've not yet had a normal rainfall, so we've not really made any headway as far as catching up on our water deficit. We do have half decent moisture in the surface of the soil, down to maybe a foot or two, but we're going to need a lot more than that when we get into those days of summer when corn plants and soybeans and other crops really have high water demand. So,
It didn't take you very long to find out when you drove up here that we haven't had much snow this year either.
Yeah,
Without that snow cover, we're going to be hurting too.
yeah, we had actually on our way up had come along the lake, and we're quite surprised by how low the lake was. And it's a big lake to be down that low.
Our lake is more than 2 feet below normal,
2 feet.
and we haven't seen the lake this low in, have you heard, Calvin, maybe 30 maybe 30 years. We've seen it much higher. You know, when it gets over close to 102 feet, then a lot of farmers along the lake get flooded out. But at this level, it's amazing. I live 18 inches from the Saranac River, about 4 miles west of Plattsburgh, and all my years, I've never seen the river that low at this time of the year. So
Yeah,
it
that's
seems like every year has some kind of anomaly to show us, you know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the back of their mind too think about, well, we know Mother Nature has a way to even this thing out over time, and there's
Let us hope.
concern
like
about
the,
when
like
it
the stock
evens.
market, right?
That's
Let's
right.
hope it evens out.
I want that to grow. I don't want it to even out.
Does your job with Pioneer force you to travel a lot? Or?
I do a fair amount of traveling, yes. It's a little, unusual that I would come up here and spend 3 or 4 days in the North Country.
Well, we're glad to have you,
But
Joe.
well, it's good to be here too. But I only do that maybe every 2 or 3 years. I'll come up this way. Most of my work is down in Pennsylvania, and traveling around mostly in the state of Pennsylvania and some Maryland also.
You know, when kids are 5 or 6 or 8 years old, little boys, and you ask them what they want to be, they say policeman, fireman. I never heard a 5 or 6 year old boy saying he wanted to be an agronomist. How did this goal of yours develop? When you were later in college, or?
I guess probably when I was about 10 or 12, I would go over to my neighbors who were dairy farmers and start to do little odd jobs around the farm, and get a little older, you start to do a little more and get involved with some of the cropping work and the milking the cows, and say, hey, it's pretty cool, maybe I'll go do something like this when I grow up. And in high school I was an FFA through 9th through 12th grade.
Sure.
Off to college at Penn State and studied agriculture, and worked in the extension service for 6 years, and then came to Pioneer, and been with Pioneer now the last 14 years. So.
Well, what's the big question farmers are asking these days? Calvin and I were talking about raising soybeans. There are a lot of farmers raising soybeans and processing soybeans for all the reasons we know and some we don't know. What's the big question there? What are people talking about?
I think when we look at what's going on with New York and New England with soybeans, it actually is a growing market. There are more acres going in to the crop. So a lot of the questions revolve around, well, how do I plant these? What row spacings are the best? What maturity should I use? What kind of fertilizer programs? Those sorts of things that they will ask, kind of beginning basic things they want to get right to grow a good crop of beans. And of course, where can I market them? How can I do the best job of getting the best price for them?
We've interviewed several farmers since we got here, and many in the past years. And what we've learned is anymore you can't farm by gosh and by golly.
Right.
You've got to study.
Yeah.
You've got to talk to experts. Thank God for people like Joe, because that's your job, to pass along the information they need to make their farms more productive and more efficient.
Yeah, and it's not just me either. It's our sales organizations. It's all the people in all the associated businesses. This piece of equipment behind you's got more technology on it than the Apollo 13 spacecraft had.
Look at the name on the hood there, Calvin. That's called the Predator. I don't even know what it is. What is it?
That's a computerized spray rig that goes out and treats weed issues in crops, and it's designed to cover a lot of acres really fast and eat them up like a good predator.
Isn't that amazing? If the old farmers from 100 years ago could come back and stand here with us, they'd be a little bit amazed, wouldn't they?
They would be. They would indeed be amazed.
But it takes equipment like this to run big farms now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really is kind of an economy of scale type of business, and you have to do a really good job of growing the crop, but you have to do a really good job of marketing the crop too. That's really almost where the money's made these days, is figuring out how to market that crop and do the best with it.
It's a real science to grow things properly, to figure out the weather, as we talked about drought conditions, and to have a crop that comes out ahead so you can make 5 cents to pay to put the next crop in.
That's right, and you're really very fortunate here that there are a lot of excellent growers right here in this area that do a good job and they're up on their technology, they know how to compete, and they do a really good job. And we've got some really first-class operations here locally, and we might think it's kind of out of the way or not part of the Corn Belt or something like that. You might get the impression that maybe they aren't as up to speed as they would be out there, but I tell you they are, and they have to be better to farm here than they do to farm in, say, Iowa or Illinois.
We talk a lot about our quality of life in this part of northern New York. You got some beautiful parts of the country down there in Pennsylvania, and even in people up here think of New Jersey as an extremely metropolitan state, but there's still some nice spots in New Jersey too.
Yeah.
But we favor this area, and we talk a lot. We wish that copies of our little program could be shown in some of the metropolitan areas to let those people know that farmers such as we've talked with earlier today from this area and across the border in Canada have to work awfully hard for a living, and they need some louder voices with our federal government to keep their heads up.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of twofold. I mean, they need some support from the government to help with the marketing aspects, some of those things, but they also need to understand how important some of this technology is to help them be competitive and to compete on the world arena. Things like genetically modified crops and the benefits they offer. I mean, it offers benefits to farmers, but those products also offer benefits to consumers. But somewhere in the process, we're not getting everybody to understand what those benefits are, and they really create more healthful, more consistent, higher quality products, and that's part of what we're trying to do here.
Do you, Joe? Do you have to take more schooling every year to keep up to date on all the new science?
Yeah, you really do. It's science and technology now is changing fairly rapidly, and kids think you get done with college, you're done, but no, I spend, and most of people in my business are spending about 2 weeks a year on some kind of update training or maintaining their certifications. Like certified crop advisor would be the most common one that people in my business deal with, and you got to spend 40 hours a week updating your skills just as a routine practice to keep your certification. So
I think it's a good point that we mentioned to to the kids who are thinking about getting into various aspects of agriculture that this is a good field that you're in. I mean, you have to, first of all, you have to get your feet wet, learn a little bit about agriculture as a young person as you did, and then pick a school where they have the right program.
Right.
You were lucky to have one of the best in the country.
Yeah, I went to Penn State, which has a good agriculture school, and actually Cornell's got a great agriculture school, and they're actually particularly good in things like biotechnology, and then those are avenues. They're very good in dairy science, that traditional field of farming, and if you're into corn and grain and those, you go to some of the Midwestern universities. Purdue is excellent, Ohio State, Iowa State, Michigan State's a great school. So there's a lot of great ag colleges out there and a lot of experiences you could have depending on where you want to go with your life and your career. So
did you settle down pretty close to where you were born?
Actually, yeah, I have always lived in Pennsylvania my whole life, and I've never been more than 2 hours from home. So
There's a lot to be said for that.
well, I like it. So
Adventure is okay. It's okay to travel, but you know, Calvin's the same way. He lives in essence, in the house he was brought up in.
Yeah.
All those years ago, and I don't know when that house was built that you live on the Ridge Road. Do you know? 1800s?
I'm assuming it's a brick house. I'm assuming in the early 1860s or so, in that era. That's a lot of brick houses were built around the time of the Civil War.
Yeah, and it's amazing because we love to see these family farms that persist, because as we mentioned when we were on the other side of the room for you, there was a news story today, disheartening news story, that over the last year in New York State alone we lost 500 family farms and over 1 million acres of farm land. So it's really cool for me to see a family farm like Calvin's, and the other gentleman that came from just north of the border in Quebec, and his family has been farming the same general area for 200 and something years. That's kind of
amazing,
neat.
yeah. And Pennsylvania has a program too where they recognize what they call century farms. So
Yes.
every year there's a new group of farmers that have been in the business 100 years or more, and the state government will recognize those people and do a nice job of showing recognition.
We got to do something for the farmers while we still got them around to do something with.
Yeah.
Joe, it's been a pleasure to meet you and
Nice
to
pleasure
talk
to
to
meet
you.
you too, yeah.
Are you staying up for a day or two? and
Yeah, I'll
heading
still be
back?
here through tomorrow morning yet, so
That's wonderful. Have a good trip back and have a great life.
thanks, appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Joe. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Well, we moved with the other pioneers outside the building. I want it to be noted and chronicled on this document. And then, oh, look at this up here. Look over here in the sky. The geese are coming back. Is that cool or what? That's beautiful. I love it. That's got to be a sign of something. Everybody's seen robins but me. I haven't seen any yet, but I hope to real soon at my place. I started to say I want it chronicled. I want history to note that I did not have any pancakes and sausage here today. I also want you to note that that rumbling you heard in the background wasn't a piece of farm equipment outside. It was my stomach saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" I want to thank Germaine and the boys for inviting us up here again to Pioneer Days. We always have a lot of fun. Every year we get to talk to the farmers, talk about farming, and sometimes we even throw in another stray subject like one-room schoolhouses, and that's kind of neat. This place has grown quite a bit since we were up here the first time. I noticed there's a substation over here. I think those storage tanks were built since we were here the first time, right, Calvin? I think so. I do want to let the farmers know here in the North Country that we do support you in your efforts. We'll take every opportunity to speak on your behalf and to speak with you any chance we get. We've, as you know, Hometown Cable, our little corner, Calvin and myself, and even the late Bob Venn before that, spent a lot of time working with and for farmers, traveling to the various county fairs, the community centennials, bicentennials, sesquicentennials, because country folk are the best folk there are. And farming is a truly wonderful exercise. I don't want to leave our audience with the fact that it's a terrible way to make a living. It's not too many farmers, especially the smaller farmers, are able to make an awful lot of money. But at the end of every day, having accomplished what they do in producing the milk or the cash crops, as our Canadian friend does, or whatever, there is a great deal of satisfaction in it. So please, if you're a young person contemplating your future, don't be afraid to go to a school. Maybe you want to become an agronomist like Joe, or maybe you want to do something else, become a politician and support farming and farmers in the North Country. It's always a kick for me to come up here so close to the northern border of Clinton County. This is a slightly different world, and we're used to being in most of the time in Plattsburgh, New York. But it's great. These people are wonderful people, and if you don't get that by listening to our broadcast, then you don't get it, folks. These are good people. Congratulations to all of you who work with and for the farmers in the North Country, and good luck with everything you do in the coming year. It's impossible for us to predict with any precision at all what kind of weather, what kind of a spring and summer we're going to have, but we hope it's not a bad one for the sake of the farmers. We hope you stay with us. If you have suggestions about what topic, there they go. Look at the geese over your right shoulder, Calvin. There's a whole bunch of them over to your right at about 2 o'clock, and a few pigeons to mix in. I think, isn't that a wonderful way to end our program? For those Canadian geese heading north, back up to Canada for the summer. Can spring be far behind? You gotta love it, folks. You don't need any more words from me. Just watch that beautiful V with a few stragglers heading north across the border. Customs won't even bother to slow them down, will they, huh? Again, thanks for watching our program. If you have any information or pictures about one-room schoolhouses, if you taught in one or went to one, maybe you can get a few of your friends and neighbors together who did the same, and we can figure out a topic for another Our Little Corner. We just never know where we're going to be, so join us the next time. And yes, that's the way I end every program. Who knows where we're going to be next time for Our Little Corner?